What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Team Kitchen Fable video. Before I get into our deck tech with Team Kitchen Fable member Tyler Brotton about his Aggro Katsu that placed in the top 2 of a ProQuest, I want to go ahead and plug our Twitter and our Patreon. Both of those are great ways to stay connected with the team, and on the Patreon we post exclusive deck techs, videos, early access, and you'll have access to our Discord where you can get games with team members and friends of the team. But now that I've said that, let's go ahead and bring Tyler on. Tyler, what's up, man?
Hey guys, how's it going?
So, yeah, I mean, just basically, how did your ProQuest season go? And crazy enough, you're running Katsu. I know we saw your name in an article by LSS. I guess Katsu is so far below what meta means these days that LSS makes a big deal when he hits the top 8. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this season I've actually been in the middle of a big move. Moving, I moved to South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and so this is actually the only pro quest I was going to get to. Um, and I just wanted to have fun. I wasn't trying to, win or anything. So I was like, I want to play the deck that I have fun with, my favorite deck, my favorite hero, which is Katsu. And so, yeah, basically my goal is to just see how fast we can go, see if we can beat some people in some races, and it turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah, I'll ask you more about that in a second, but I just want to say, tell us why you're moving down. And George from Compete Sport, I hope you're hearing this. I hope you know that people are watching this video, and we appreciate you. Wink, wink.
Yeah, so I'm working with George at Compete Sport now, managing his shop, and yeah, I'm excited to start that next journey of my career, but also be in a place where I can just play a lot and grow the game that we love. So,
Yeah, the best place to play probably is Compete Sport now with you at the counter. I mean, you are
of
a
course,
huge reserve of knowledge, so I'm sure that players of all skill levels will just have value having you in the shop. But yeah, so I think you mentioned this as a comfort pick for you, right? And the reason you're able to excel is because it's a comfort pick, right? It's not exactly the greatest meta thing. I mean, most of Starvo's disruption shuts this down. And if you ever see an Oldham, you're just gonna have a really bad time. So I know we'll get into it more later, but was there anything in particular that you were concerned about going into what matchups, etc.?
not a whole lot. I mean, part of me picking Katsu for this pro quest is all about knowing your local meta. I knew that there weren't going to be very many Starvos. In fact, there was only one that showed up. And I knew that because, well, I know the guys that played the store, but also, like, no one really wants to play Starvo anymore since it's going out of the meta. And for ProQuest season, most people that are going to have fun and not to win, of course you want to win, but, like, not a whole lot of people are going to go to France from the US, especially in this area. And so I expected a lot of people bringing their pet decks, people bringing aggro decks that they wanted to race, especially with chain. They want to see if they can race chain. And so that's what I did. I brought my pet deck. I brought the deck that I wanted to have fun with, and I just expected a ton of aggro. And that's what we had. I think the top 8 was just all aggro decks. There's the Dash went undefeated in Swiss. I ended up losing to a Briar in the finals. There's also aggro Lexi. That made the top 8 as well. So yeah, I was expecting that kind of a meta, and that's what we got. And so we were able to draw hot most of the day. The only thing I was really worried about was Bolton. We have a good Bolton player at our store. Good thing I didn't hit him. Bolton is a pretty tough matchup for Katsu. But besides that, we did about as expected with predicting the meta.
Cool. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the deck list now. The way I have this sorted out is Katsu is very much a package hero, right? He's got a number of different packages, and I think that fits really well. And that fits well with his main mechanic, which is combo. So we've got our one-offs over here, our generics over here in the main deck. 100 wins combo, leg tap combo ending in hurricane technique, flick flack sink below as your main D reacts. and I do believe that those are in the sideboard to bring us to a core 60. And then we have, of course, the holy grail of ninja combos, which is that Lord of Wind. And then you've got those enablers, right? So, not only attack reactions with Razor Reflex, Lunging Press, and Ancestral Empowerment, but we've also got even bigger than that, which with Everfest, this was a massive boost to Ninja's ability to compete with things like Crown of Siege, Shield, Frostbites, all of that. Why don't you just take us into the list, kind of lead us through how you play it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so like you said, this list centers around 3 main combo lines. The Surging Strike to Whelming is the main one. That's where we put a lot of our slots for. We have 5 Surgings and 4 Whelmings in the main board, as well as 3 McGincheys and then the 3 Lord of Winds. So that's a massive chunk of the deck. Ideally, you want to get off 2 of those lines each game, and then more if you have to play a longer game if you're getting controlled. But yeah, so the Whelming Gust Wave is actually a really key card of the deck because it gives you a draw trigger, but also gives you go again as well. So that becomes a must block card for your opponent. And if they let you have it, well, then you just get it to draw a card, and then you get another 4 attack coming in at least. And then if they block that, if you have an ability to get a McGinchey off of that as well, McGinchey also becomes a must block card as well, because if it hits, you can do a search for your Lord of Winds. And oftentimes you have it coming with your Kodachis, you're able to get another draw. You might have something else where Lord of Winds can pitch to do the Lord of Wind ability, or you can pitch to come in with Kodachis and then come in with some other stuff if you still have cards in your hand. So that's just a really good combo line. The next combo line is the leg tap to the Rising Knee Thrust, the Hurricane technique.
Before we get into that, I want to touch on something that you just said, which is in the Lord of Wind line, it sounds like what you're doing, right, is you're threatening your card effect draw triggers up front, right? And then as a result of that, if you can get through that, you still have Kodachis and probably another attack action to threaten a mask draw trigger. So you're kind of it dilutes the threats and kind of de-incentivizes them just blocking one attack, right? Because if your Whelming is your third attack, like if you for some reason you go Kodachi, surging hits, right, and then you Whelming, that's not great for you because they're getting a ton of value by blocking that Whelming, correct?
Yeah, you don't want to stack your draw triggers on Whelming with Mask, because then that's an easy block for them. What you want is you want to start right away with Surging, because you pitch a blue. The whole line costs 3 resources, so you pitch a blue to play Surging, you have 1 floating, and now you're going to come in with Whelming, because they're probably going to let Surging hit. They should anyway. And so you have 1 resource floating on your Whelming, and so either you have the McGinchey or you have a Razor, and so it puts them in a tough position. And so if you can arsenal like a Whelming or even a Surging early on, and you can have enough cards in your hand to be able to search for either Whelming or McGinchey, and you have the other one, then that's going to give you a real advantage in this line, because it lets you play out the whole line. And that was the goal. I upped the number of cards in the deck for this combo line, and I've been able to draw 2 or 3 pieces of the combo line pretty consistently once per game, and so that's always exciting when you don't have to cut the line in half and stop at Whelming.
Yeah, nice. So you were going into our next combo lines, which is leg tap and 100 wins.
Yeah, so the next one is leg tap. Leg tap to Rising Knee Thrust is just a value line. Leg tap is 4 with go again, and Rising Knee Thrust is a 0 for 5 with go again. And so most of the time you don't go further than that with the Hurricane technique, unless for some reason you had arsenaled it or already had it in your hand. But you just do the Rising Knee Thrust because you get value off that. And that line isn't very threatening, at least the first 2 attacks, and so they're probably going to let that hit, and so you get value and you get it to hit. Hurricane technique, if it does hit, and you can play it, then it gets +1 and go again. And if it hits it, you get to put it back into your hand. So you have something to pitch with, or you can come in again for 4, or you can arsenal it and save it for later. So there's just a lot of value that you can get off Hurricane Technique. It essentially becomes a 1 for 9 unless they want to block it. And so they don't like blocking that card because they don't usually see it. And so it's good value there.
Nice. So I haven't played Katsu since Nationals, so we're now venturing into my lack of knowledge about the class. Rising Knee Thrust, my favorite combo to play against Rune Blades, because they're like, oh, it's 5 damage, and then you come in with the Hurricane Technique, and they're like, wait a minute, that's 9 more. Hold on a second, right?
Yeah.
So here we're going into 100 wins, and then obviously EBTT here in the future. So yeah, tell me about the 100 wins combo.
So when I saw 100 wins, I loved it right away because in the list before Everfest, I played 6 head jabs. I played reds and blues of head jabs. And this card is just an objectively better head jab. It has combo written into it, so it works with breaking skills, and each future 100 wins you play gets a +1 buff. And so that's just really good for Ninja. There's also great utility in these cards because you can search for it. So let's just say you have an attack that hits, and the only other card in your hand is like a defense reaction if you're playing a fatigue match, or even bigger than that, but you can't get it to trigger, or like a soul beat strike. Like you can always discard something to go find a red 100 wins if you need another card with go again. And so those are great to search for as well. And then the Winds of Eternity are just like it's a 0 for 4 and it's a blue. Like that's just really good because we need those blues to pitch. And if it can attack for 4, like and it puts the 100 wins back in your deck if it hits. It's just really good value off of a blue.
Absolutely. So I see that we've got some generic attacks, and we've got two attacks that don't combo into or out of anything. Do you want to tell us about this set of attacks that you have going on over here?
Yeah, so the other attacks are just value. We're trying to get value 0 for 4s, trying to get some go again, some card draws. The Fluster Fist is in there as a one of, just in case you want to search for something that gives you extra value. Like if you have 100 wins and that's all you have, and your attack just hit, but that's the last card in your hand, you just discard the 100 wins and you can come in for 4 instead of 3. Like, and it blocks for 3. Like, it's just what you want it to do, and you can go search for it. And then alternatively, the Soul Beat Strikes are another 0 for 4. If they hit, they get go again. Oftentimes you're discarding them, but it's also a decent card because sometimes it gets them to block. So if you can get them to block a Soul Beat Strike and you have 1 card left, you just arsenal it anyway. Like you weren't really gonna play it anyway, so it's pretty cool. E Strikes are what they are. It's one of the best utility cards in the deck. They work really well off the even bigger than that. So that's my favorite card to do off that because you get to draw a card and you get to go again. Snatches are what they are, 0 for 4, and if it hits, you draw a card. There's ways to give snatches go again with the even bigger than that, or with razors or the Snapdragon Scalers. Ravenous Rabbles, most of the time they're 0 for 4 since there's a high red count. They have go again. And then we got Scar for Scars, 0 for 4 with go again. And we got a Bingo. That one was just for fun. It's good value. It's a 1 for 5 that blocks for 3, and it has a relevant hit effect. So I actually won a game playing Bingo at the ProQuest, which is pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, it's just good value card.
How did you win? Was it like the kill card, or did it get an on hit that just led?
Oh no, it was a kill card. They didn't have enough cards left to block out, so that's always fun. So if that's just the fun card I put in because it's a fun deck. If you wanted to be serious, I put it in instead of Pounding Gale, which is another combo card that comes in 1 for 5 that you can search for if you have a floating resource. And so, but I just like Bingo because it is what it is. Yeah, so that's the main attacks. And so what I like to do with those is either finish out a combo line with them or use them early on to bluff with. And so coming in with the Ravenous Rabble as your first attack, knowing that you have a Surging Strike in your hand, like they're gonna let the Ravenous Rabble hit, so you're gonna discard another 0 in your hand to go search for a Whelming, and so it's a way to hide your combo line so that they don't know that a combo is coming, but you still get to have an extra opportunity to search your deck with Katsu. So those provide good value there.
So let's talk about obviously, we kind of glossed over this, but armor set. I'll speak for you on this one. Armor set, Mask of Momentum, must have into the on the ninja. There's nothing better, and there probably might not be anything better with Uprising. We'll find out.
It's just a great card.
Yeah. It's constant pressure throughout the turn. It basically you know what the punishment is. Your opponent knows what the punishment is. Hardened Cross Strap. This is a big enablement, right? So when you're tight on resources, you have a big go off, or just when you may be on the back foot and had to stop it on hit, you can clap back with a Surging Strike for free, which is pretty massive.
Yeah, on the Hardened Cross Strap, I only run 12 blues in the deck, so sometimes we get an all red hand. It just lets you start resurging there as well.
Nice. Yep. And then Breaking Scales, pretty obvious. Battle Worn is great, and then just being able to go over with combo to enable the rest of your turn is pretty massive. This is just like Mask of Momentum. It's a constant threat. Your opponent has to consistently evaluate if they want to leave you open to utilizing Breaking Scales. And, sometimes leaving you open, right, it might convince you, if your hand is bad or just, whatever. Breaking Scale has like a large range of how effective it can be. And so your opponent can leave you open and be like, yeah, like worst case you get to, a Rising Knee Thrust on this turn, right? Or worst case you can get to a Winds of Eternity on this turn. And they evaluate that a little differently. And then at the end game, it's always, you better overblock or you're dead.
Yeah. What I like to say about the equipment is when you put your equipment in your deck, know which cards in your deck you're going to break it for before you go into the game. And so I'll only use this on Whelming or maybe McGinty. Whelming to get you the card draw, McGinty, if you have other cards in your hand that can still attack, then you get to search for Lord of Winds for more pitch and more opportunities for a Mass Trigger. So I wouldn't use it on any other cards.
And what are you using typically with Snapdragons? Is it anything, or do you have like specific targets in mind?
Whenever I need it, that's also my philosophy with the equipment. Use it when you need it, even if it's turn 2. Like if you need a Breaking Scales to draw you a card, then draw yourself a card. Snapdragon I'll use for Snatch if they don't block it, E-Strike if I'm drawing a card, or to start a combo line. Like if I draw a Whelming McGinty, I'll consider using Snapdragon to give Whelming go again. Yeah, most of the time there's not all the cards, all the attacks, not all of them have go again. So you will need the card sometime at random points. And I would say don't be afraid to break it if you know you can force more damage through with more hit effects.
So let's talk about your enablement. We'll start with EBTT. Just tell us how you're playing this out and what cards are you typically going to grab?
Yeah, so I run 1 red, 3 yellows, and 2 blues. And yeah, they're just really good to be able to search for just any card off the top of your deck. The yellows are my favorite because they're still yellow pitch, so they can pitch for the Kodachis if you need to, or for Surgings. But also you get to opt 2, and in this deck, opting 2 will most of the time get you what you need. And so you're always playing these after the Kodachis, getting a 1 attack in, and then usually I will come in with another attack before I play even bigger than that. Like if I had a blue, and I come with a Kodachi and it hits, I'll come with another Kodachi and then play the even bigger than that before it resolves. Or I'll play like a Ravenous Rabble and then play the even bigger than that before Rabble resolves, because the card will only see 1 attack that is hit, and that's the Kodachi. And so then you can play this and then go search on top of your deck. The best targets to find are E-Strikes and Snatches. But really anything will do. You're just looking for anything that you can continue to attack with. And then the cool line with these is that you can combo them together. And so if you have one in your hand, if you have two of them in your hand, let's just say you hit with a Kadachi and you play a red even bigger than that, you can opt to put cards on top of your deck, and then like if it's like an E strike, then you can play the E strike and you draw a card, and you already know what that card's going to be. Then you can play another even bigger than that before the E strike resolves to get you another Quicken token after the E strike. So you can combo them off of each other that way. So that's pretty cool.
And then I think these are standard. I think lunging press is probably the most out there reaction. It's not something no one's ever seen before in Katsu, but these are very familiar to those familiar with Katsu. So I know as a former Katsu player that sometimes, especially since I played mid range, I don't play aggro. To me, in mid range, my reactions were the most valuable cards in my deck because they were my limited resources to push damage and continue combo lines. But tell me, how are you playing these out? How do you feel about them? And is there ever a time that they are inconvenient to you?
Yeah, they're just great cards. The only inconvenient time is if you draw them together. Like if you have a hand with multiple razors, that's not very good, especially if you have all reds in your hand. The lunging presses are in there because they're blue, they cost 0, and like you win games on lunging presses because they count out in your graveyard your ancestrals, your razors, but they don't count out lunging presses. And so and even like using them if you happen to have one to push an extra damage, like they account for breaking scales all the time, but they don't account for lunging press or they don't account for ancestral, and so you can get some card draws off those as well, or just pitching one lets them know that they need to be watching out for them. So um, that's why they're in there. Ancestrals are really great because you get to draw a card as well off of it, so it's a free +1. And it blocks for 3. So, yeah, so you're just using these whenever you need to push a hit effect. And they're great to Arsenal. I love them out of the Arsenal because you just have them there when you need them. And yeah, they're just great cards to have to help you get those hit effects off.
Cool. Yeah, that's great advice. And so I'm going to quickly gloss over the sideboard guide, and we're going to talk about it later in our matchup discussion. So we're going to just name the cards out here, and then the matchup discussion, people will be able to hear about when you're using them. My favorite tech that you've introduced to me, and that I played, that I've played in, I've put it in Chain, I've considered putting it in Briar, and that is Talisman of Ties. And this is if an opponent would draw one or more cards on your turn, they draw that many cards -1. And for Katsu, it's a blue pitch 0 cost, so it enables Kadachis right when you don't need it, and it allows you to get over Old Him, and now he's living legend now, but Starvo basically says if you want to crown shield me, you're gonna have a bad time.
Exactly. They don't get their card off of Crown of Seeds is why that's in there. So it's just really good.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've got 3 CNCs, 3 red unmovables, I believe 2 red flick flacks and 2 red sink blows, along with Tunic, I would imagine, for some of those longer games.
And an Art of War.
Yes. What are you using this for?
Just longer games, control games. Ideally, you want to use your Tunic resource for it. Gets you a bigger hand. It can let you push some extra damage against Oldhim or Sarvo that is liking to prevent a lot of your damage.
And are you playing this in the reaction step typically? Like, are you trying to throw out like a Ravenous Rabble or something, and then +1 it, banish, and be like, oh hey, I'm back to a 4-card hand, and all my attacks are stronger? Or how are you playing this?
You could. I usually like to play at the beginning of the turn, so then I can map out what my turn's going to be. Because there's a chance you may not draw any attacks off of it, and that really hurts. And there's a chance you might need to go again as well. But yeah, I just like to play it early. But you can play it after an attack, to get a Katsu draw trigger. That's also a really good way to play it as well.
So now let's go ahead and talk about things that, we'll get into the matchup discussion afterwards. But before we do that, let's talk about things, tips and tricks, things people should know about Katsu. Go ahead. I'm just going to let you sound off. This is all stuff that you sent me, and I just want to let you, share your knowledge about the hero.
Sure. Yeah. So this is all just most of the stuff's little stuff that people might not think about when playing Katsu, and yeah. So the first one is you need to know what your cards are in your deck, and so you need to know how many combo lines you have, what cards you're running, and at all times you need to know what you still have left in your deck. You don't want to go search for a combo card and have it not be there, because then you'll just search and not find anything. Or you can pull out 100 wins if you need to bail yourself out. You can always search for 100 wins. But Katsu pitch stacking is never a thing. You're shuffling your deck, you're searching and shuffling your deck 4 times a game, and pitch stacking is just useless. But it's also the reason why I like to run only 12 blues. When you do the math, 12 blues means that you don't draw one per turn, you draw less than one per turn. So you have some yellows in there that can help with that, but also if you're shuffling your deck, the blues that you're pitching are eventually going to give you a higher density blue count throughout the mid to late game. And so you'll get back to that 1 blue per hand ratio eventually. Second point is that whelming gust wave. Try to enable that at all costs. Use breaking scales to let it hit, and don't let it be the third attack whelming, because then it's an easy block. But you want to give yourself multiple draw triggers per turn, and that's how you do it. The third is what I was talking about earlier about bluffing your combo lines or hiding your combo lines with a generic attack, with like a Ravenous Rabble or a Scar for a Scar. Use those as an extra opportunity to go search with Katsu before you play your combo line out, if you can. Most of the time you can, but sometimes you might need to use that as your 0 cost that you discard. Or you can also use like a leg tap to bluff a Surging Strike line. Like they're like, oh, like I'll let leg tap hit because Rising Ethos isn't bad. But then you go search for a Whelming Gust Wave off of a leg tap, and they're like, oh wait, I probably shouldn't have let that hit, because then you have a Surging coming after the leg tap. So it's all fun stuff you can do is to hide your combo lines. 4 is bluff a Razor with floating resources. For some reason, people are always concerned about the Razor over just any attack that you do, especially if you have like a high-powered attack like a Snatch or Whelming Gust Wave. If you have 1 resource left and you have 1 card in your hand, then, or if you have an Arsenal card, then they're automatically thinking about the Razor and they're trying to block around it. And so sometimes you can get people to block a Whelming for 8, even though you like are gonna follow up, like you already have a McGinty in your hand, or you're just gonna play, like a normal attack after that. So it's pretty fun to play those mind games with people with what you have left, especially if you like, and that especially works if you like didn't use a Kodachi, like when you have a floating resource. If you come with 1 Kodachi and then your line you still have a floating resource left, then it's fun to play around like that. And then the last point is that blocking is almost never mathematically correct in this deck. Some cards don't block, like the even bigger than that, and then some cards block for 2. But most of the cards will block for 2 or 3, but then on your turn you can play them for 4 attack. And so as long as there's not a hit effect, if you have a Snatch coming in at you, then it makes sense. But if you have a raw attack for like 5, and you could like block for 5 with 2 cards out of your hand, or you could use those 2 cards to come in for 9 attack on your turn. And so, that's the whole point of the race. You're like trying to beat them on the math, and you're trying to outvalue them with your attacks by attacking for more than what you can block with. And so that's the big downside of Katsu, is that it doesn't block well, especially if you're not running any defense reactions. And so if you are going to block, make sure it's worth it. Make sure you're only blocking stuff that have like an on-hit effect, especially the draw card ones. And so, or you can block with whatever cards you're not going to use on your turn. but you calculate when you're going to block, because the moment you start blocking is when you have to go on the defensive and you get less powerful turns. And that's going to turn the tide of the game. You need to continually put pressure with this deck, and that's what the deck is built to do, is to put constant pressure and just never let up.
Yeah, I love how you touched on the mind games, because Katsu is the only hero that can, well, you can say Dorinthia, right? But I think Dorinthia in some ways is more punishing, in some ways is less punishing. I think that there's more agency to the blocking player when you're playing against Dorinthia. And with Katsu, there's more agency in the Katsu player. And what that means, the only comparable things that I can think of when in terms of Katsu's damage ceilings being hidden at the start of the turn is a Briar Force of Nature Channel Mount turn, where they could just throw out a few swarmings and then a snatch and, etc., and just keep going. That's A, a lot of setup, B, not a lot of things you can control there. But with Katsu, and since all of that damage is visible, my consequences are more visible with Briar. And with someone like Chain, you kind of know what Chain can output as soon as the shackles flip, right? You have a pretty good idea. There are some non-attack actions and, the use of creepers that can widen that out. But at the end of the day, you can see all of that. Whereas Katsu, there's a lot more agency on you. And while your card values or consistency won't always be there, there are ways to, if you play the hero the way it wants to be played, there are ways to make your opponent, mess up or not play correctly, right? Because of that ambiguity.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the matchup discussion, and this is where we'll wrap up. And yeah, so this is just tell us. I think it's a pretty tight matchup discussion. That was a little rough of a transition. I didn't test that, but here we are. And so you've got Guardian, Prism, and then everybody else. So let's jump into it.
Yeah, and so this deck is made to just go fast. And so the sideboard is really geared towards a Guardian. You just throw in your entire sideboard. You take out I take out the red even bigger than that, and then replace the cross trap, the tunic. But yeah, so you're gonna need those defense reactions. You need to arsenal those for Starvo. And for Oldhim, you just need everything in your deck, because they're gonna try to they might try to fatigue you, or if it's the pummel build where they try to go a little more aggro, then you need the defense reactions in your arsenal. And so yeah, so you just need your whole deck in there to push over enough damage in your turn, because Katsu is at risk of getting fatigued. If you use all your attacks, then all you have left are like Kadachis, and so you don't have a very powerful attack coming in after you're done with your attack action cards. And so against those decks, you have to pick and choose when you're going to push damage, and you do have to block a bit more, especially with the defense reactions. Against Prism, you still want to race Prism. It's pretty easy to race, but I throw in the CNCs and take out the Soul Beads, because Soul Beads don't hit very often because they have Spectral Shields. And CNCs are good poppers, and they can destroy something in their arsenal, which they like to arsenal some attacks. And then everyone else, you just run a tight 16 race. Like, you just run your 60 cards, and you're just trying to beat them based on value and damage. I will caveat this list as well. There are a couple times I may consider throwing in the Sink Belows and the Flick Flacks. That's against Bolton, and maybe against Briar, and maybe, yeah, against those two decks. I would consider running the zero cost defense reactions. That's just because Bolton is the worst matchup of the deck. They can usually get there if they're playing combo sabers, and they'll go down to like 6 health and then have this big pop off turn, leave you at 5, and they'll go back up to 16, and then they just have momentum the rest of the game. And so you need the defense reactions to help prevent some of those hits, because a lot of your deck is attacks and give their swords buffs, and so you don't want to be blocking with those. And then Briar has snatches that they can give go again, and so you can get some good value off of a 0 for 4 defense reaction, especially with the Flick Flax, because then you can block for 5 on their next attack, or filter your hand through Sink Belows. And so Yeah, that's just the sideboard guide. It's pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. You just want to race and have fun playing the deck. So that's what I wish for everyone. A lot of people like to play Katsu just because it's fun. You can go search for stuff. You can set up these big combo line turns where you've played 8 or 9 cards on a turn. And so there's a lot of people who love Katsu just because of that. And so Katsu will never get old. It'll never get not fun to play. And so we're hoping with the next set we get lots of support for Katsu. I'm not too hopeful. I'm expecting maybe one generic ninja combo line and then maybe a couple cards that can go in the deck. I'm expecting Fi to just be better overall, but you never know. Katsu could make a comeback with this set. We're hoping and we're expecting, and we're looking forward to what Uprising will bring for Katsu.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for hopping in. Um, and I'm sure everyone here is going to see more of you on the channel. You're a really valued member of Team Kitchen Fable, and we're gonna be grinding hard going in a road to national season. So
For
appreciate your
sure.
input.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, please, check out our Twitter, check out our Patreon, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And Tyler, I know you're not on Fab Twitter or social, to my understanding. There's no like
We'll get
personal
there.
plugs. You're gonna get
We
there.
got plans. We got plans.
You got plans. All right. Yeah. I think you'll be a wonderful you'll have a wonderful voice there. And I guess another shout out to Compete Sport, which will be you're in the process of moving to go manage.
Yep.
All right, everyone. See you in the next one, and have a wonderful day.